both a graphic designer and a Minecraft player, I always find myself using the principles that I learned in college in my builds and my other stuff I do in the world. Seeing as Minecraft is essentially an art form in its own right, I figured it would be a good idea to teach you guys what I know about design from the perspective of an actual designer. To continue this series, we're going to episode 2, which is about texture, and more specifically how to use texture to make your builds look a little better and add some character. Okay, so to get started in this video, we're going to talk about textures on walls, or more specifically, how to make a wall that starts off looking like this, which is okay. It serves its purpose of being a wall, look a lot better and give it a lot more life by doing something like that to it. Now, granted, you might not love this, and opinions do matter and opinions vary. Let's get rid of this wall. Of course, originally it was just dark oak planks as the wall, but seeing as dark oak planks look really, really lifeless and just ugly in general, this doesn't. What's the difference here? What's going on? So we have, of course, some spruce planks. That's what those are. We have dark oak planks, dark oak stairs, and then black terracotta, believe it or not. That's black terracotta. It does look black from that angle, but when there's direct sunlight on it, I've noticed it looks a lot more brown, which paired really nicely with this wall palette. Now, as much as they like to talk about color palettes, and you might notice that the rest of these are also of their own palette, a monochromatic palette to be more specific, we want to talk about texture itself and how the texture is helping this wall add some character to it and just in general, something more visually pleasing to the eye. Of course, we have patterns that run left to right, like these planks, they run left to right, at least on the wall perspective. We have this, which has almost no texture on it. It's not 100%, textureless, but for the most part, you can call that a flat texture. Then you have this texture, which runs vertically or horizontally, depending on the way you place it. But it also has different colors, which of course keep these looking different. And then we have a physical texture. And what I mean by that is that the stair itself is missing a gap, right? Of course, there's a half gap right there, half block wide or half block tall gap missing from the wall, which not only adds something to it, it might be an old wall, right? It might just have slots for like shelving, for instance. If you have a wall and you have a shelf, now you have a shelf right there. There's a lot of reasons that you could use this half slab, staircase technique to add texture to your wall. But what I find it does, and I'm gonna delete that too, is it really just gives it a lot of depth. So of course, texture itself isn't just color. It isn't just physical shape. It's a mix of things. But I find that we can also see it relevant on this wall and that wall, that when you add blocks that look different, but use the same color tone, right? This is stripped oak, that's oak planks, right? They pair well together because this lacks a lot of detail. This has a lot of detail. These pair well together because this is physically missing something, while that one, of course, is a full block, which means it has more detail to it just by default. And then when you pair all these together, you come up with something like this that looks, in my opinion at least, really nice for adding some life to it. It gives it a little background, a little bit of reason, And the same can be said here, especially when you get into stone structures, which use walls. Like this is stone brick walls, right? Those are stone brick stairs, stone stairs, andesite. You have a lot of options here. Of course, the stone pairing next to the andesite, they're both gray, so they both keep following the same color scheme, of course. Same with the bricks, but there's 3 different textures here, which when you pair them together, look a lot nicer than just a flat stone gray wall. Sometimes less is more, but I find that if you're doing like a castle wall, or you're doing just a, castle itself, and this is the structure of the castle, adding some bricks like that, or some stairs like this, or some stone brick stairs like that, really adds some life, just like the granite does to the brick here, and same with the polished granite to the brick. Everything kind of works together instead of against each other. But now that you've got an example of how different textures can work together and still feel really nice, and this is a perfect square to exemplify that. Sometimes you'll have flooring, and over here I have flooring. Now this is just a spruce floor. It could have been any floor. I just decided to go with spruce. But there's of course a lot more texture to this than just, let's say, a square made of just spruce planks. We have spruce trap doors. We have stairs, adding these little etchings here. Not that they serve any direct purpose, but let's say this is like an entryway to a castle, right? It looks a lot more detailed and grand, which adds a lot more like quality to it, if you would, right? It looks more expensive, more fancy than just, let's say, alternatively, a flat plank floor that's just planks. Yes, this does work, but I find that adding in some detail, even if, let's say, you didn't add that, but you just added some trap doors and some of these every once in a while, I'd say that this is still a lot more interesting to look at than that would be. And again, all it comes down to is what you like. It comes down to what you feel is good. But I've noticed that the more texture you add, the more life a floor feels like it has. Sometimes that might be messed up, that part of the flooring, or this flooring might just have, some metal brackets that hold it down in place. I don't really know what the actual story behind it would be, but every piece now has some character. Everything has a little bit of style, which makes it more arty. Again, functional's not bad, but I prefer it like this. And you can see the same applied from any angle you look at the walls. Now back here, following up the floor texture, more specifically, I have path textures because I know that paths are a huge thing, but depending on where you're living or where your biome your building is in, right? Paths will be different. Sometimes you might live in the desert or by a beach and you want to have a path that has some detail. That's not just sand, but of course has a little bit of like, you know, it's used a little bit. This is a stripped birch. This is end stone. This is sandstone and then sand, right? And patterned and just spaced out. Even though this stripped oak, for instance, is very different looking than the rest of it, I find that every once in a while, if you just scatter it about, it looks pretty nice. And the same goes for here, a very simple plains biome path, for instance, right? You have your path, coarse dirt and gravel, and then the occasional grass block that just makes its way in, just to like make it look like the path is worn out, but not everywhere, right? It's unevenly walked. It adds a little bit of character, a little bit of like depth and design to it, if you would, rather than just path blocks all the way. Now, I am using BSL shaders, so the colors might be a little different, but I'm using the default texture pack. So for the most part, it should be pretty accurate. This is pale oak wood, right? This is deep slate. This is mud. And this is concrete. Gray concrete, mud, deep slate, and pale oak wood, I find pair really nicely together. And then of course, this is another path style. This is a variety of blocks, right? We have tough, mossy cobble, andesite, coal ore. We have bricks and we have stone. So we're using quite a big palette here, which might be costly for your builds, right? But I quite enjoy the way this looks. Now, a better way to do these things right would be to not have them be so square. Let's say you want to have the path be a little bit used up, right? We can throw some grass back in here. We can have something like that, which does also work because again, you're building into your environment using not only color texture, but shape texture and patterns. And it all works together. Now, it's a hard one to explain texture in my opinion, but I wanted to give some ideas of how different textures can work together and examples of like very common build practices, in my opinion, that all look really nice. It's hard to teach. There is something to be said about the way you use it can determine a lot about the build and the end product. Of course, you have texture with color, you have texture with shape. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope this helped you guys out. If it did and you enjoyed it, please leave a like. Stay tuned for the Let's Play series. I'll see you guys there. And thanks so much for watching. Can we make it daytime? Good night or good afternoon, whatever time it is for you. Don't know. All right. Yeah.